think you've heard the Republican Party brand?
Not remotely.
Not remotely.
I've never heard a man or a woman talk with such a whine in their voice.
Inconceivable!
There's a reason why Congress has 10 to 15% approval rating.
Take a look at the congressional approval rating right now. It's at 5%.
Actually, I think I'll just tear it up.
Unfortunately, Speaker Boehner has reversed himself. I don't know why.
They had a deal, but Obamacare.
It reminds me of a Jack Lemmon character in his later career, kind of a nervous business guy.
Man, it's been sort of rough the past few weeks, what with my cold and...
Who's done something wrong and his business is in shambles and he just looks like hell.
I didn't come here to shut down the government.
We don't want the government to shut down.
You think Obamacare is a big enough threat to this country that you need to shut down the government over it? Own it. Don't fart and point at the dog.
The Republicans own this shutdown.
Is the government going to stay shut down until we reach the debt limit?
You hear on every newscast that if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we will default on our debt.
There's no reason for us to default.
We won't.
All this talk about a default has been a lot of demagoguery.
But what he's saying there, that it is false demagoguery.
A lot of false demagoguery.
This is increasingly becoming the new Republican normal.
Mark? Yes, sir?
Denialism about the consequences of breaching the debt ceiling?
No, I just wanted you to respond to Melody. No, I would say no.
Do you think the denialists have a point?
They were nihilists, man.
Huh?
They kept saying they believe in nothing.
Or do you think that a breach of the debt ceiling would be catastrophic?
This is reckless.
We all really enjoyed that. Let's get right to our panel. And joining us now, Cycle co-host Crystal Ball and Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post. So, you guys, I am fascinated by Republicans in a lot of ways because the extent, Crystal, to which they can hang on to a delusion is remarkable. And up to now, what you've seen is Republicans insisting that they can get rid of the Affordable Care Act, law of the land, Supreme Court ratified, but that they can get rid of it by shutting down the government. Now that that hasn't happened, they're still not backing down. Why?
It's unbelievable and it's hard to fathom. I think the person who was the most honest about this was that Congressman Marlin Stutzman, who said we don't basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, that it's about respect. We have to get something or we lose face. And that's the whole problem here. We cannot give them anything because that's what this is all about. We can't continue to have this cycle of crisis after crisis after crisis. So even if we give them some token fig leaf to clutch, then they're going to go back to the well next time thinking that they can get a bigger fig leaf. That's what we keep seeing.
No, and actually, and Jonathan, what's interesting too is that you have sort of the Paul Ryan wing of the party, the supposedly more pragmatic leadership wing of the party. He comes out, he does this op-ed where he tries to pivot away from this obsession with the Affordable Care Act and say, let's get back on the firm ground of fiscal discipline and cutting deficits and debt. And then, as Congresswoman Slaughter mentioned today, just on the last segment, he had to take it back. They made him take it back.
It just shows the power of that minority within the minority of the majority in the House, but minority meaning that they don't have the Senate or the White House. They still have control. Obamacare is not going anywhere. The Affordable Care Act is not going anywhere. And yet we're talking about people from, as we talk all the time, they are from super safe districts, and they were sent to Washington by people who want them to do exactly what's happening right now in Washington.
But what's interesting, they're from super safe districts. Okay, we can concede that, but you do have about 23 to 25. You had that public policy poll, Crystal, that came out that showed there are vulnerable Republicans. At what point does their self-interest kick in? The polls are showing their people in places like Ohio and California, districts that are still red, but barely red, who are endangered by this. When do they stand up and say enough is enough?
Well, but I mean, the problem all along has been that it's not those folks who are in districts that are even remotely turnable. They are not the issue here, except in that they are, as you're pointing out, they're being quiet. A few of them have come out and said they would vote for a clean CR if it were brought to the floor, but they're not willing to sign on to a discharge petition, at least none of them that I've heard from yet. You know, they're not willing to really force leadership's hand on this issue, and so it ends up being those 30, 40, however many Tea Party members at the far extreme who are driving not just their party, but the policy of the entire country and the future economic well-being of the entire country at this point. I have to say, going back to the Congressman Paul Ryan op-ed, he must have been pretty surprised to find out he is no longer conservative enough for this party. I mean, talk about a litmus test. This is insane.
Their last vice presidential nominee, and now his word, he has to take it back so quick. I want to read you really quickly something, Jonathan, that your colleague E.J. Dionne wrote, one of besides yourself, himself, one of my favorite columnists at the Post. He wrote, what the Tea Party and Boehner did not reckon with is that Obama and the Democrats are done being intimidated by the use of extra constitutional means to extort concessions that the right cannot win through normal legislative electoral methods. And that's the key.
Yeah.
That these are things they can't get through elections. They're trying to force them through this process.
No, absolutely right. EJ is absolutely right. And what they didn't bank on was that the president would be firm. And you know what, as I wrote last week, or I can't even remember anymore, earlier this week, where, you know, this Republican member of Congress said that the president's been moving down in the right direction. Well, of course he would say this because in previous battles, the president has given. He has given concessions to the point where Democrats, their heads explode. So of course they all thought, oh, well, they're just going to go after, the president will cave this time. But ever since the 2011 debt ceiling crisis, the president, everyone in the administration looked into the abyss and decided, you know what, that's it. We're not doing this anymore. Anyone who didn't see this coming was blind.
Yeah, and I think Jonathan's exactly